Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm your host, Cesar Carino, and today we have as a special guest, we have Norabelle Hontert. And Norabelle, you've been around Wadsworth. Are you going to tell us your age?
Well, I guess I'll have to. I was born in 1940.
So that makes you 65 years of age,
I will
and you're
be
finally
65.
eligible to be on the program.
Oh,
Now, where were you born? I mean, I know that you were born in Wadsworth, but where in Wadsworth were you born?
down at the old Wadsworth
The old
Hospital.
Wadsworth Hospital, the horse barns.
The horse barns.
Yes. Now, everyone knows the story about the fact that the mat shop gave that hospital to the city, and it was a horse barn before that. Where were your parents living when you were born?
At 287 Crestwood Avenue.
You were born there on Crestwood Avenue, and you lived there all of your life until almost
Till I was an adult.
until you're a fully grown adult, and then you went somewhere else for a little while. But tell us about the Crestwood neighborhood. Who were some of the kids you played with, and who were some of the neighbors and all of that? Can you remember them?
Oh, yes, I can remember them. In fact, I wrote them down just in case I would forget.
Well, let's hear them. Who are they?
Okay, starting at Durling Park.
Right.
On the west side was Weinmiller family.
The wine mill. Oh, my heavens. I hadn't heard about those people for
And
a long
then
time.
Kulos moved in
Kulos, right.
later. And then the next house was Joe McAdams.
Joe McAdams, and he was a person at the mat shop, wasn't he?
Yes, and he has son Tom.
Tom McAdams.
Uh-huh. And then the Cooters moved in that house
That's
in
Charlie
the 50s.
Cooter
And Mary Lou.
And Mary Lou. They're both gone now. I had them both on the program, incidentally.
Right. And Frank, their son, was in my class at school, and he was killed in an automobile
On
accident.
261 in Hartman Road.
Right,
Yes, and they still
right.
have a son, Marvin,
Correct.
who is married to Martha Sowers.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And then the next house was Poland's.
Oh,
And
yes.
I don't remember their first name. And then the next house was Shook's, and Shooky ran the Miller Jones shoe store.
Bald-headed, nice person.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then the next house
Matter of fact,
was,
what was his first name? No one ever called
Floyd.
him by Floyd?
I think it was
We
Floyd.
just called him Shooky.
I know, I know. And the next house was Mary and Ken Giffen,
Oh, yes. Ken
and
Giffen
they
was
had a
the
son, Bill.
Bill.
Uh-huh.
Bill is probably in his mid-60s now.
Yeah, I think he's 2 years, maybe 3 years younger than I am.
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
And Ken Giffen was in the schools for a long time as a teacher, and then he became an executive at the Citizens Bank.
Right. And Mary was a school teacher, too.
Mary was a school teacher, right.
In fact, she was one of my favorite teachers.
Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the next house was Ray and Olga Blesh,
Now, the Blushes I'm not familiar with. Did they live there long?
quite a while.
Did they?
And they had a son, Ray Jr., and a daughter, Shirley.
How old
Now,
were
they
they?
were quite a bit older than I was.
Okay, then they
So
probably-
the Blushes were elderly when I was
I
a
see,
kid, and of
okay.
course Ray Jr. and Shirley were, they're probably a good 30 years older than I am.
Oh, well,
So,
that's probably, okay.
and then the next house was Jim and Fran Swartz,
Oh, yes.
and of course they had Sandra and Tom, and then they moved.
Now, he was at the mat shop too, wasn't he?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Then he married a Chupa girl, did he?
Yes, he did, because
Mary-
Fran passed away,
Right.
and I think they moved up on
Mary-
Franks Avenue.
Yeah, Mary Chupa.
Right.
His second wife was Mary Chupa. Right.
Uh-huh. And then Howard and Harriet Dressler moved in
right.
that house then.
Both Howard is still living.
Yes.
Harriet died, Harriet Gates Dressler,
Mm-hmm.
and she lived out of Clark's Corners. Her mother was Laura Gates, father was Harry Gates, and the brother was Bob Gates, but he went by Bob Whitey on the radio.
Right.
And then they had another sister too, and I have to think of her name. I know her married name was Cecil, but I cannot think of her first name right this very second.
Well, I became real close to Harriet. She was kind of, I came home from school and I'd go over and talk to Harriet for a while.
She was
you
a
know.
pianist.
Yes, had a beautiful grand piano in her living room.
And studied piano at Baldwin Wallace. As a matter of fact, her husband married two pianists because when Harriet died, he married.
Freeze.
Yes.
I can't think of her first name though. Oh, here we go.
Oh, mercy. It'll come to us in a second.
Okay. And then the next house was Sabrell's.
Right. Roy Sabrell?
Probably Ralph.
Ralph Sabrell, okay.
Ralph and Alice. And they had 3 children. And then they moved, and Bill Mager moved in.
Bill Mager. He had been in Sevilla before that.
Right. And
but
then
before that, they lived in Silver Creek.
Oh, okay. And then they moved, and Bob and Imogene Siffert moved into that house. And then the next house was Ralph's brother, Roy Sabrell. And
Roy was next door then.
Right.
Roy was an attorney, wasn't he?
I think so.
And
yeah, and they had a daughter, Barbara, I think, maybe about your age.
Let's see. Barbara's a little older.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. And then Monty and Jenny Skank moved into that house.
Of course, they no longer live in Wadsworth. I think they live down in Florida.
I think they do too.
And Monty Skank and his family actually ran Doors Incorporated for years and years.
And then when they moved, a family by the name of Williamson moved in there.
I don't know.
And they didn't live there very long and moved out of town then. I think he was with one of the rubber companies or something. And then the next house was Les and Mary Blau.
Oh, yes. Les Blau was in the electric department. As a matter of fact, he collected money at the window in the City Hall for utilities for years and years. Tall man.
Right. And Mary was a school teacher.
That's right. And he always wore a green shade, as I remember.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then, of course, they passed away, and Ford and Geneva Hovis moved into that house.
And Geneva, of course, was a teacher as well.
And then the next house was a lady by the name of Mrs. Bordeaux.
Oh, yes, Hilda Bordeaux.
That's right. I couldn't think of her first name.
She had a son, Bob, who died when, let's see, that would have been 1945. He drowned in the Brickyard Pool.
Yes.
Brickyard Pool, Bob Bordeaux.
My brother used to rent their garage off of them, and I actually had to call Dan to get her name because I couldn't remember.
Hilda Bordeaux, B-O-R-D-E-A-U.
And then her brother lived with her then in later years, and I can't remember his name.
I know it.
I can see the two of them walking past the house.
I can't think of it either right now.
And then the next house was Anderson's, Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen Anderson, then she married one or two other people, didn't she? Married Bill Alexis.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. Her husband died, Mary Ellen. She was Mary Ellen, when she was single, she was the secretary at the high school.
Oh, really?
Yes. Mary Ellen. Can't think of it right this very second, but then she married an Anderson.
Okay. And then the next house was Fisher's.
Which one?
And that Eddie Fisher.
Eddie Fisher, but they live at.
They lived down on the corner of Woodland. And Dan reminded me that Eddie Fisher lived in that house because I couldn't remember, because that became the parsonage for the Christian Missionary Alliance Church, and Pastor Smith lived in that house in the 50s.
But you're saying that the Fishers lived way up on.
Yes, up on Crestwood before they
moved down to the corner of Woodland and Prospect. Yes.
Yeah, right across from the park, from the ball field there.
Eddie Fisher was a large boy.
Yeah.
And drove Cadillacs.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And then the next house was a family by the name of Allen, and they moved away. They were from Cleveland, and they lived there just a short time. Kids were about my age, and the next family that moved in there was Dick Pethel.
Allen.
I don't know where they came from or where they went. They were in town maybe 2 or 3 years.
Did they have 2 daughters?
They had Barbara and Judy, I think.
Right. Barbara married Bob or Don Willemeyer.
Oh, really?
Yes, Don Willemeyer, the minister's son. And Judy, I'm not positive, but they came from. As a matter of fact, Barbara and Don live in Hudson.
Oh, okay.
I believe, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, they didn't live there a long time, and then Pethels moved in, Dick Pethel, and I used to babysit for them, and then they moved on, and Riggs I lived there, and I don't know who lives there now, but when we left Crestwood, Riggs were living there.
There.
And then the next house was Cal and Val Martin
Oh, yes.
with Jim and John and Bob.
Yeah.
And
All our contemporaries.
yeah, and then starting on the east side of Crestwood from
That
Durling
Durling
Park
Park.
was Harriet Mansfield.
Harriet Mansfield, right.
And she had a daughter, Jane, and I don't know if I remember a Mr. Mansfield.
Oh, yes, so surely, yes.
Who was he?
He was the one who had the IGA store.
Oh, okay. I just can't picture him. And then the next house was Ted and Edna Ewing.
They had 3 children.
4.
4?
Yes, they had Norma and Marjorie.
Oh, that's right, yes, Norma, Marjorie,
and
the 2 boys.
Tom and Dick.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
that's right.
And then Mrs. Bowie lived in the next house, and I can't tell you what her first name was. She was an elderly lady, and I don't recall children being there or anything. So I just know her name was Bowie.
I know who she is only because of name. I don't think I know her that well, though.
Okay. And then the next house was Sam Ackerman.
No, not Sam, Lou Ackerman.
No, Sam. Lou lived farther up.
Well, Sam didn't live there right away. He lived in Butler, Pennsylvania, until about the mid-40s.
Well, that I remember.
Oh, that's right. You're talking mid-40s, aren't you?
Right.
Yes, okay. Yeah, before
Sam and Stella.
Right. And they're both dead now.
Oh, okay. And then
they had a daughter, one daughter only.
And see, I don't even remember
yeah.
her, so
Well,
she
she
must
was
have been
grown.
quite a bit, yeah. And then Art and Madge Gilman moved into that house
Right.
when Ackermans moved out.
Art and Madge Gilman, and they now live in Sharon, don't they?
Well, I think Madge still's around. I see her occasionally.
Art?
But Art's gone. I think Art.
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think they're both alive. Yeah, I think.
Well, I just saw Madge not too long ago, and she's doing well.
I thought they lived up on Highview Drive or somewhere. Art and Madge Gilman.
Yeah.
I think I live in Highview.
And they had 2 kids.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then the next house was T.J. Sailors.
T.J. Sailors, who's the banker.
Right. And then Schultz's. Ray and
Schultz.
Ruth Schultz moved
They had
in.
3 children. They had
Right.
Patty, boy's name I can't think of.
Terry.
Terry, and then
Carol.
Carol.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a teacher.
Yes, at Norton, I believe.
Well, he was a teacher in Wadsworth, too.
Oh, really? I knew he was
in
at
the 30s,
Norton.
In the 30s, he was a teacher in Wadsworth. Ray Schultz taught history at Wadsworth Central High School.
Oh, well, see, I wasn't here then.
And then he taught at, as a matter of fact, he was my teacher many years ago. And then when I became a principal at Norton, we were colleagues.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, great. And then the next house, of course, was our house.
And we're going to talk about the well scenes
Okay.
in depth here in a few minutes.
Yeah, and my dad built that house in '28, so we lived there until we moved. Then the next house was Verna Critchbaum Gaston.
Right.
And she was there the whole time I was around. And
She had 2 children.
3.
3?
She had Isla Jean
Isla Jean
Leatherman,
Leatherman.
Glee Barton, and son Claire.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, forgot about Claire, Glee, and then she married Bob Gaston's mother, Bob Gaston's father.
Correct.
They both died.
Yes, very nice people. I loved
yes.
them. And then the next house was Louis Ackerman.
Lou Ackerman, right?
Lou and Renee.
Rena.
Yeah.
Rena.
Oh, is it Rena?
Rena.
Yeah, and of course they had Donnie and Karen.
Karen, right.
Uh-huh. And then, of course, they moved to Worcester.
Right.
And then Art Wright moved into that house.
That's right. Art and his wife
And
Liz.
Uh-huh. And they had a son, Tim.
Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Ackermans, of the Ackermans, the only people who are living from the Ackerman family right now are Don and
Karen.
Karen. And from, well, you're going to be mentioning another sister, the Kahn family,
Oh, okay.
pretty soon, aren't you?
Uh-uh.
Sadie Kahn lived there, too.
Oh, she did?
Not in the same house, but next door.
Oh, because you mean north of them?
Mm-hmm.
Because Harder's always lived there when I was there.
Sadie
Carl.
Kahn, Sadie and Lee Kahn lived there as well on Crestwood. And she was a sister to Lou Ackerman. And then they moved to Worcester. All of them moved to Worcester.
Oh,
All of them are dead now except 3 people. One is Donnie Ackerman, Karen whatever her married name is, and Lee Kahn.
Oh, okay.
All the rest of them are all dead.
Okay. Because when I was around, Harder's lived in that house north of Ackerman's. That was
Harder
Carl and Billy Harder.
Billy.
And they had 2 children, Carol and Sharon.
Right.
And then Mrs. Wessenbarger was in the next house.
Alma Westerberg.
Alma Wessenbarger, yeah.
And her husband was with the unemployment people in Barberton or something like that.
Yes.
And she worked as a secretary at Ford
Right, the dealership.
dealerships all the time.
Yeah,
Great person.
yeah,
Great
yeah.
personality.
I liked her a
And
lot.
she had 2 children,
Yes, Glenn
and
Don.
and both are
Okay.
still living.
Okay.
Glenn lives in Wadsworth on Far Avenue,
Far.
and Don lives in the Youngstown area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the next house was Springer's from Springer
Right.
Furniture.
Dick Springer and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had 2 children.
Barbara was
Barbara,
the one I
the
knew,
girl.
and you said
Dick.
there was a boy.
Dick. Mhm.
And see, I never knew him. He must
Yeah,
have been
Dick
quite a
Springer.
bit older.
Not too much older, but he was closer to my age.
Oh, okay. And I can't place him.
They had the Wadsworth Furniture, or the Springer Furniture, I guess they called
Right,
it that time.
right, down-
Which had come from the Finney Frock and Furniture.
Oh, okay. I never knew that either.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And before that was the Good Furniture, the funeral home as well.
And the furniture store was down where Knapp's is now?
Knapp's is right now is a big 3-story building, and it had a freight elevator. And the reason for the big freight elevator, that they had caskets that had to move up and down.
Oh, my goodness. I remember there was like quite a few steps going up to the
Oh,
front door.
Many, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Well, and the next house was Shapiro's.
Yes, that's Paul,
Eleanor, was it?
Eleanor, was it, the older Shapiro?
Well, she had a son, Franklin.
Yeah, this is the one who was Paula. She
Okay.
taught French at the University of Akron,
Oh,
and she was a Jewish lady from one of the Eastern Bloc countries, and I thought her son's name was Norbert.
no, Franklin was the one I knew,
Franklin,
and he was
okay.
about a year, maybe 2 years younger than myself.
Okay. Well, now that could have been Norbert Shapiro and his wife Eleanor. Is that?
Well, I don't know. Now
See,
I'm confused.
Paula's son was Norbert, and Norbert was married to Eleanor Eiler Shapiro, who wrote one of the first histories of Wadsworth. That's so significant. 'Cause of
I think that's,
what we're trying to, well, not one of the first ones, but one of the more recent ones. And it's significant because what we're doing here is trying to gather information for the person who writes the history in the year 2012, which will be our 200th anniversary here in our 2014 will be our 200th anniversary. Paula Shapiro, who taught French and also was very strongly allied with the American Red Cross for many, many years in the early 40s and early 30s, or late 30s, is the only Jewish lady buried in the Sharon Township Cemetery.
is that right? Oh, I never knew that.
Yep.
I never knew that. And I'm not sure what happened to them because they
Well, it's probably you're all
moved
gone.
away.
They
Because
moved
Franklin,
away.
I don't remember Franklin going through school with us.
Well, they probably went to private school. They could have done that.
okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. And then they, as I said, they moved, and then a family by the name of Foster moved into that house, and I can't tell you anything about them.
The Fosters, Ann Foster, and her husband, Bob Foster, I'm almost sure. She taught at Norton, and he was a councilman. He worked at one of the Barberton companies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then next to them, or north of them, was Barris Burbeck.
Oh yes, Barris Burbeck.
And they had the 2 girls, Marlene and Pat.
Patty. And Patty still lives in Wadsworth. Marlene is married to. She's married to. Mercy sakes! I know it as well as my own name. Bob. How I miss my mind. Isn't that something? Swigert.
Well, Patty's married to Johnny Swigert, yeah.
And Marlene is married to Lou Arden Snyder.
Oh, that's right.
Lou Arden
Yeah.
Snyder, right.
See, Marlene and Catherine, my sister, were really close
Right.
friends.
Mhm.
And then the next house north was Burton and Irene Wolf.
Right.
And that's where I took 12 years of piano lessons out of that
Mrs.
house.
Wolf.
Yes.
Just stately lady, wasn't she? Just
Oh, she was beautiful. She was wonderful. And that's as far as I go because Mom would never let me go beyond Far Avenue, so I don't know anybody
there wasn't too
else.
much beyond Far Avenue.
Well, that's true, too.
Because there's a dirt road from there all the way up to 261.
Yeah, there was a
isn't there?
few like the Robinsons, and Dr. Wursler lived up there. And,
Right.
But,
The Robinsons was Hap Robinson, and they had, what, 5 or 6 girls?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Phyllis.
Norbergs lived up there, I remember.
Who?
Norbergs.
Norberg, right.
Uh-huh.
And you mentioned the Wurslers. He was a dentist, and his wife. That's wonderful. That's what we like to hear. We like to hear all of the names of these people who lived on the street. Now let's go down to, what is it, 297?
287.
287 Crestwood, the Weltsings. Tell us about the Weltsings.
Well, the Weltsings. My father was Clyde. And,
Born 1903.
No, 1905.
1905.
He was born in 5.
So he'd be 100
And
years old now.
he was born in Cleveland, and his father was a blacksmith. And they moved into Remsen Corners.
Which, tell us where Remsen's Corners is in case it's not here 50 years from now.
Well, it's on 94 there between, Granger and Hinckley?
Right.
And
North
it's
of
kind of
Route
a
18.
crossroads, you know.
North of Route 18.
Correct. And I think his father still continued to be a blacksmith. And then they briefly, and I just learned this recently, that they moved to Akron for a couple years. And apparently didn't like the big city, so they moved to Wadsworth. And they moved to Wadsworth in 22.
And where did they live in Wadsworth, do you know?
They lived on High Street, on the second house on the west side up from Tolbert.
Okay.
It's a stone house, and it's still there.
Still there.
And they moved into that house, and my dad would have been a South Warren High School when they moved to Wadsworth. And of course my mother lived on High Street too, and so I think that's how they kind of got together. She saw him going by, and she liked what she saw, and
He probably liked what he saw.
probably, and,
And
they kind
then they got
of
married.
connected. They
That's right.
got married in 28.
28. Then.
And so forth. But my dad's father got a job at the Ohio Match Company as a blacksmith. And then he died in 26. And
Your dad's father's name was?
Carl.
Carl. And how many siblings did your father have?
He had a brother, Victor, and a sister, Lola.
And where are Victor and Lola?
Well, they're passed
They're
on
gone
now. Yeah.
Now, your father was the oldest, wasn't he?
Yes, yes. And
Victor was born
Victor
when?
was born in 1911.
11.
And he died in 99.
And he lived here in Wadsworth.
Yes, he did, on
Married
West Street.
one of the Snyder girls.
Vera.
Vera Snyder.
And they had 4 children, Mike, Karen, Camilla, and Ann.
Right. And Mike would now be probably close to 60 years old, wouldn't he?
Well, he's a year older than I am, so he's 66.
Wow. Time flies by.
Yes, doesn't it? And all the kids live out of state. They're all over the United States, so we don't get to see them very often. And then my dad's sister Lola was born in 1914, and she married a fellow by the name of Floyd Webster from Sharon Center, and they spent all their years in Sharon.
Sharon Center.
And she was a secretary for the Highland School District.
Oh, I see.
And so forth. And she died in 97, and I want to mention this because I think this is so strange. My dad died December 24th of 77. My Aunt Lola died December 24th of 97, and my Uncle Vic died August 24th of 99.
No.
They all died on the 24th of...
Listen, you need to be careful the 24th wherever we are.
I
if your
know,
name's a Wilson.
but I thought that is so, isn't that
Yes.
unusual to have something like that happen?
That's right.
But
Very, very unusual, as a
yes,
matter of fact.
we didn't realize it till it happened the third time, and
Third
I
time.
suddenly said, do you realize that these 3 siblings all died on the 24th of the month?
Tell us about Clyde Welsing. He did a lot of things in Wadsworth, was very active, extremely dedicated to the community in so many ways. Tell us about him. Give us a
Well-
little thumbnail sketch of Clyde Welsing.
Clyde, as I said, graduated from high school in 24, and went to Akron U and wanted to become an electrical engineer. And his father passed away, as I said, in 26, so he had to quit school to come home and support the family since his brother and sister were younger. And so he went to radio school and learned to fix radios. And that's what he started out doing and was very successful at it and continued to do so until TV kind of took over the industry. I can remember going out with my dad in the early 40s and going on repair jobs where because people had big console radios at that time.
With tubes in them.
With tubes in them, yeah. And
They always
so
went bad.
and so I can remember going with Dad out to people's houses, and he'd be fixing their radios and so forth. And so I guess he thought that the radio business was going to be rather limited and he needed to expand himself, so he got into the automotive repair business, which kind of went along with his electrical engineering because he liked to repair the electrical parts on cars, you know, and he did like to do a lot of bench work and that sort of thing. So he opened up a garage and mechanical repair.
And where did he open it up? What was the name of it?
It was called Carburetor and Ignition, and we were on the south side of Broad Street. There was this Ohio station where the Marathon station now stands on the corner of Lyman and Broad. And my dad rented 3 bays.
From?
I think it was Harry Mensch.
Harry Mensch, that's correct.
Yeah. And anyways, he opened up a car repair business, and he had mechanics.
And when did he open that up?
I'm not real sure if it was sometime in the 30s.
Very much.
You may know that better than I.
It was in the 30s, right?
Okay. I know he was well into the business when I was born, but I can't tell you the exact year.
Now, before you were born, something else had to happen. We skipped by that in a couple seconds. Let's find out a little bit more about that. Your mom saw your dad walk down the street. Your dad saw your mom walk down the street. Then they got married in
28.
28. Mm-hmm. Who was this girl who's walking down the street?
Geneva Everhard.
Geneva Everhard, whose father was a carpenter.
Correct, Durbin.
Durbin Everhard, and whose probably his greatest work that everyone sees right now is in the Trinity United Church of Christ.
That's correct.
Because he did all of the altar work there, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Really a good craftsman, one of the best around. As a matter of fact, he had a reputation. Durbin Everhard had a reputation that when he figured a house or figured a job, there was not enough scrap left over to make a campfire.
Well, he built the house that my mom and dad lived in on Crestwood.
A beautiful
And
job.
my mom and dad purposely didn't get married to 28 because they wanted to have a house to move into. So I suppose the construction began probably in 26 or 27. I don't know how long it took to build a house back then.
And Geneva Everhard's ancestry goes back about 150 years in Wadsworth, because beyond that there was Hartman.
Correct.
And the Hartmans are the ones after whom Hartman Road is named.
Correct.
Which we used to call Gypsy Lane, and now it's called Hartman Road. So they are memorialized in that way. Let's fast forward now. Then we have you born, but we've skipped 2 other ones. Whom did we skip?
I have a brother, Daniel.
Born?
In 1931. And he presently owns Sky Park, the flying community in Wadsworth. And I had a sister, Catherine. Born in 32, and she passed away in 94. And married an Italian boy from Erie, Pennsylvania, and had 5 children. In fact, one of her children, your brother Henry, was her godfather.
Godfather.
Yeah.
Catherine was born in 32?
32. No? Oh, okay.
No.
What year was she born?
I shouldn't be telling you.
She graduated in 51, I know.
She was, you could be, had to be very late in 32.
Her birthday actually was in January.
Are you sure it was 32?
Well, I just know she graduated in 51, and we always said she was a year younger than Dan, so he was born in 31, so.
The reason I'm saying that is that,
You think she's born in January 33 then?
well, I'm not, obviously I don't know when she was born, but she was 3 years behind me in school.
Yeah.
And that means that she would have to be at least 3 years younger than I, and I was born in 31. We'll check that out.
Okay.
We'll check that
That's
out.
pretty bad when you don't know when your own sister was born. Well, I know she died in 94.
Yeah, she died in
August of
94.
94.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that completes the family then.
That part completes the family.
Right,
Now, let us go back to Clyde and tell
Okay.
us about the other kinds of things that Clyde Wellsine did in addition to repair radios and repair cars, and his what I would consider from the impossible life that he had to leave during the Depression when his father died. Well, his father died the year before the Depression, but that was, I mean, he was trying to make a living at that time.
Right.
And taking care of a family, and to be able to get a house, buy a house, and then also to buy a garage, or rather to start a garage, and it became a very successful garage. As a matter of
Oh,
fact, one of his mechanics at the very beginning was my brother Henry. In
Oh, yeah.
1941, he started in 1941. And he stayed at the spot where he rented for a few years. Then he did what?
Well, let me back up a little bit. In 46 or 48, he bought the Hayes Arnold garage.
Which was across the street,
Which was
where
across
the
the
library
street.
is right now.
Right. It
Hayes
was
Arnold was a Chevrolet.
correct. It was a Chevrolet dealership.
Lauren Hayes owned it, and Arnold, can't think of Arnold's first name.
Okay,
They owned it.
and I still have the bill of sale actually at
Yeah.
home, and I can't remember if it was 46 or 48 that my dad bought that building.
Well, let's see.
Does that?
Probably 48.
And then
Probably
he
48.
rented it to Jack Summers.
Right.
Jack Summers came into town with a Chevy dealership.
And he was from Lodi.
Correct.
They had summer Chevy Oldsmobile in Old Lodi, and he brought the dealership to Wadsworth.
And Jack stayed in the building till 56, and then he built the present building out on Broad Street where
Right.
they are. And that's when my dad decided, instead of continuing to rent the building, he was going to move into it himself. So we moved across the street in 56, and we had the garages in the back. We continued to do the repair, and then my dad was starting to get into the wholesale retail business. So he had a storefront that he was able to sell parts out of and still keep the mechanical part in the back. And I did that until, what, 61, I believe?
60.
60? Okay. And then, of course, that's when your brother Henry continued the business on his own then, because my dad decided he just didn't want to do that anymore.
He moved out to 125 Silver Creek, and he did
Right.
the business he called a Carino Ignition out there.
Right.
Your father stayed there for how long as the wholesale retail auto
Well,
parts?
my dad passed away in 1977.
77. And
So
who took over?
then Dan and I took over the business. Of course, we were both involved with the business at that time anyhow, and wanted to keep it going. That's when I kind of jumped in and says, I want to get a little more retail oriented, and I wanted to be the Kmart of the auto parts business. And so we redid the front of the store and made it very user-friendly for the retail trade. And I just had a lot of fun doing that. I loved merchandising and so forth.
You became one of the very few women who owned an auto parts store.
That's true. At
How many
that
other
time,
women in Ohio?
as far as I know, I served on the automotive council in the late 70s and 80s, and there was just one other woman, and she was called the Queen of Parts down in Canton, Ohio.
Queen of Parts.
And I believe she's still there, as far as I know.
And Norabelle, the Queen of Hearts.
I don't know, but I just really enjoyed working in the business. I truly did. I had wonderful customers, and I just really enjoyed it, and I do miss it.
We're going to come back to that, but so we won't run out of time. Tell us what two more things that Clyde Wellsine did in his lifetime that were particularly significant in Wadsworth. Then we want to go to Norabelle and the significant things that she has done in her lifetime, which are significant in terms of Wadsworth.
Well, my father, one thing I really do remember him being very much involved in was the church, Trinity United Church of Christ now, I believe it's called.
It was called the Reformed Church at that time.
Right, and he was very instrumental, head of the building committee that constructed the educational wing on that church, which doubled the size of that church. And it was quite a project, it truly was. And he was the head of that, and he was head of their consistory, very much involved with the church, very much. And his role in the community, he was very active in the Red Cross. I believe he was the treasurer of the Red Cross for many, many years. Got into politics a little bit, ran for consul at large, and we laugh about it because the only ward he lost in was his own. So he obviously didn't make it, but that's okay because he was busy doing other things. But and his role in the Rotary Club was
What was his role in what was his function?
I think he held probably every office one can hold, and he was a Paul Harris Fellow, which is about as high as you can go
get, right.
in Rotary.
Well, he was one of the original members of the Rotary Club, was he not?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
One of the original members of the Rotary Club. Very active and gave a lot to this community. Norabelle did the same thing. Tell us what Norabelle did after, when you took a look at the front part of the new building across the street from where he had started, and you decided that you wanted to make it a little bit more user-friendly. Then you looked outside, or went outside on the sidewalk, looked west and east, and you decided that the city of Wadsworth needed a little bit more rejuvenation. What did you do?
I served on the renovation committee that was formed in 1982.
Who else was on that committee with you?
I knew you were going to ask me that. This has been a real problem. I just talked to Mark Friedley yesterday in Albuquerque because he did serve on that committee, and he couldn't remember either who the committee members were. And I did some searching at City Hall and still couldn't find who these committee members were. But Andy Marhefsky, who was at Bank One at the time, was very involved in that. And of course, we had EG&G Architects, engineering firm out of Akron, guide us through that.
Who was guiding? Who was the human being who guided you through
Jim
it?
Phelps.
Jim Phelps, who is now the architect for the city of Akron in terms of their planning as well.
Okay, and we worked very closely together. This was a committee of approximately 10 or 12 people. And we met up in the third floor of the Bank One building up in their conference room, and I think it was every morning from 7 to 9. And we did this until the project got going in '84.
And tell us what you did.
Well, we literally decided, they came in and did an evaluation of the downtown area and told us what we needed to do to upgrade it. In defense of the project, we had no curbs in Wadsworth. I know in front of my store, the streets and the sidewalks all ran together because we had paved the streets so many times that we lost our curbing. And I know I had a truck drive right through my front window one time because he couldn't tell the difference between the street and the sidewalk, and so forth. So there was a tremendous need to, we went down to the basics. We went down to the brick on the streets. And we replaced the lines, the gas lines, the sewer lines. We just replaced everything. And of course, cosmetically, we replaced sidewalks, the crosswalks that come out. We found out that pedestrians were having difficulty getting across the street safely. So we brought the sidewalks, the crosswalks out so that it didn't take you quite as long to get from point A to point B. And we put trees in the downtown area. And in defense of the project, I think the only mistake we made was the lighting. And we discussed lighting, I swear, for 6 months. It was a big topic, and we chose to go with the lower lighting, which today is probably a mistake because the downtown area tends to be kind of, dark.
We know we had the same problem when I was mayor. I had a complaint from somebody up in the Great Oaks area that they didn't have enough lighting on the street. because there are some turn areas and so forth. And someone said, well, shall we get a consultant in to see what we can do? And by that time, I think one of the people from the Parks Department came in and overheard this and said, why don't you just put in a bigger light bulb? And that's what we did, and it solved the problem. Is there a possibility we could just put in bigger light bulbs?
Well, I'm presently serving on the Main Street Wadsworth Design Committee, and we are addressing this issue. And my suggestion to first try, if not put bigger lights in, perhaps thin the trees and open it up a little bit to let the light come through. We probably should have gone with the taller lights, but at the time we thought the shorter lights would be prettier.
No.
Maybe not as effective, but prettier. We just weren't thinking at that time, and that was 21 years ago.
You know, it's really not too terribly dark there. It's just the fact that it's not daylight light.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And the trees have grown like we wanted them to grow and so forth. And so I think we have a beautiful downtown area, and anything that's going to be done now will probably be just, we've done the hard part. We've replaced the things that needed to be replaced.
Right. The infrastructure has been replaced, right?
Exactly.
As you sat around the table of the third story of the Citizens Bank building, and you're going to have to identify the Citizens Bank building geographically, because 50 years from now that building won't be here. Tell us where that was.
That was on the corner of College and Main Street.
Southwest corner.
Correct.
Southwest corner.
Mm-hmm.
You went to this table every morning, you said, from 7 to 9. Who sat next to you? Maybe we can start to determine who some of these people are. You said Mark Friedley was one.
Mark Friedley was one. Of course, Bill Lyron was our service director.
All right, Bill Lyron was there.
And Dave Moore was the engineer project
right. So we got
coordinator.
3, 4 now. Let's go some more.
Oh, okay. I think there was a fellow by the name of McKay that ran McKay's Shoe Store.
Right.
I believe he was on the committee. And if memory serves me right, I think I was the only woman on it. Now, I could be wrong on that, and I'm sure somebody's going to let us know if that's
bet.
true.
You
In fact, I hope you'll let me know, because I'm curious to know who served on that as well.
Now, one of the things that happens after almost every program, someone will call and say, well, this was not right, or this was right, or, you know, I had not remembered that this had happened. And we invite those kinds of comments, because this is not a finished product. All we're trying to do is collect data here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're trying to do now. Go on with some of the other things that you have done here in Wadsworth, Norabelle, that I think are significant.
Well, I've served on a lot of committees.
Name some of them.
Well, it's the Merchants Association, which is now Main Street Wadsworth.
Okay, now, you're on presently you're on the design committee.
Correct.
I think I was on that with you for a while, and then that was changed from that to the parking lot committee.
Yeah.
And then now it's back to the design committee.
Correct.
But they haven't invited me back, so evidently
Oh, well, you're invited.
They don't care for my they don't care for my my designs. I probably wouldn't have anything to add. So, but they know that you can do that. What other committees did you serve on?
Chamber of Commerce,
Chamber
of
of
course.
Commerce, absolutely.
Mhm.
And what was your function in the Chamber of Commerce? And tell us some of the things that happened during those years that you were heavily involved with the Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, golly. We used to have promotions like you wouldn't believe.
What are they? Some of them.
Okay. Well, we had a time that we had Awareness Week.
And tell us about Awareness Week. It was extremely successful.
Yeah, we did it in the downtown area.
And what did you do?
Well, we had concessions and everything, and what we wanted to do was make people aware of what was going on in the downtown area. And we encouraged the merchants all to stay open and invite people to come downtown.
Who was the executive director of the chamber at that time?
Oh, wow.
Was that Eileen? Or was it Eileen Gottwald?
Yeah, she was definitely there, but I
was
can't remember if it was possibly.
And what it was not.
Frank Woodford was very much he was
Cranston,
a
wasn't
director.
it?
Colin was after.
Afterwards, okay. So this would have been during the Woodford administration?
Probably. I would guess that Frank
Okay.
Woodford probably was director then.
And what were some of the other kinds of things that the chamber did that were significant?
Well, we did the balloon race, of
The
course.
balloon race, absolutely. That's what I wanted to hear you
Yeah,
talk about.
yeah, the balloon race. That was quite an endeavor.
And who was heavily involved with the balloon race? Matter of fact, probably the grandfather of them all, or the father
Oh, Tony Perry.
Tony Perry, absolutely.
Tony Perry and
Yeah.
Dora Aldrich was very much involved in
Yes.
that, and John Rebar and
Rebar sheriff at that time.
right. And I remember we used to go to meetings at Don Moore's house. He had a dry cleaners up in the Great
Right.
Oaks area, and yeah, that was quite an endeavor. I remember I worked real close with John Rebar for a couple years on that, and
I announced that for several years, and I got to the point where they would hand me the script, and it was the same script every year, and I got to the point where I memorized it.
oh,
And so I got there, and I'd have to get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, when they were going off the first time, then go home and come back at 10 o'clock or 12 or whatever it was. And I would just go on and on and on because it was repetitious, obviously. That was such a tremendous thing. And then it was revived several years later by Linda Chatlos.
oh,
Yeah, she revived that, and I think they're talking about reviving it again. What are the kinds of things that the chamber do?
we had our cherry pie promotion. That was a biggie.
That was a big one. Tell us about that one and how that
I
worked.
used to I remember ordering 800 pies, and what we did was we would sell these pies. This was on President's Day.
Right, on February 22nd or something like that.
Right, because there's not much you can do in the wintertime. Can't have much outside. So this was our way, once again, of bringing the public into our downtown stores. And if you made a purchase, it didn't matter how much it was, you could buy a pie for 99 cents. And so I remember ordering 800 pies, and they would deliver them down to C&I Auto Parts, and I'd have them stacked up, and the merchants would come in and pick up their pies. And
where'd you get the 800 pies?
Gardner Pie Company over in Barberton.
Right. And what did you pay for them?
Oh gosh, I think we probably paid 69 cents or something. We made something on it, but you know, it was just a fun promotion, and I know I had my picture in the paper, someone throwing a pie in my face to promote this extravaganza.
And did you lick up the remains of the pie?
No, I had to go home and take a shower. It was a mess.
It was a mess. And a couple other things that we need to get on to the other kinds of things that you've done here in Wadsworth.
Oh gosh, well, of course I've been involved with the Rotary Club.
Right.
And
can I tell a little story about that?
Sure.
I was giving a talk at Rotary Club. This is many, many years ago, before women were part of the Rotary Club. And you came in to play the piano for their beginning songs. And I think Bill Elsas was the president at the time. I said, "Bill, are they allowing women into the Rotary now?" And he said, "No, that's Norabelle Hontert.
I didn't count.
She's coming in to play the piano." And it just so happened that Charlie Jones was either 100 years old or very close to 100 years old, was sitting at a table very close to us, and he heard it. And he said, "No, we don't allow women in this place. Rotary ain't gone to hell yet."
And that was a challenge, because when Rotary International finally says, yes, you will let women in, I think the club felt obligated, because I'd been playing the piano since '65. And this was like in 90 or 91. So they immediately said, please join, and I did. And right on my tail was Pam Hickson from the library. And she had come from Elyria, and she was a member of the Rotary Club. So
you were the first female to join the Rotary Club in Wadsworth.
Correct.
Is that correct? And now, as my understanding is, that for the past 3 or 4 years, they've had at least 3 women presidents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the women are very much involved.
Well, as a matter of fact, that's why the men are happy, because they know that women will do the job.
Well, you know, the guys used to complain all the time about this and that, and I used to say, you ought to let women in here and really get the job done. You know, and so, but yes, the women are very much involved with Rotary now.
So you're heavily involved with Rotary. What else do you do?
Oh, I don't know, refresh my memory.
Well, refresh your memory. You have several pages of notes. How
notes?
about going through some of the things that you want to talk about there, which I think are extremely important?
Well, I was Citizen of the Year in 1986.
That's okay. Now, that's what I wanted to hear you say. You were Citizen of the Year in 1986.
All right.
And what were your accomplishments that brought you to the Citizen of the Year of 1986?
All the things I've mentioned, my being involved in the community mainly. I served with Literature and Arts and Child Study Club and those organizations as well, and this automotive council I was very much involved in, and that let me travel a little bit. I could go from state to state, and that was very informative. I enjoyed that a lot.
We're going to come back to this in a couple seconds, but before we do, tell us about your children.
Oh, I have 2 sons. Paul, he was born in '61, and he came to work for me in '78 before he got out of high school. I was badly in need of help, and I says, "Come and help me, Paul." And he stayed with me the whole time. I sold the business in '93 to Medina Auto Parts, and he's still with Medina Auto Parts, very much involved with them. And he lives here in Wadsworth. In fact, I live with him, and so forth. And my other son is Andrew, and he was born in '62, and he works for the city and at the fire department, and he became a fireman in '81, and in '86 he became a full-time employee as maintenance. He keeps the trucks and everything running.
Everything running.
Yes,
That's
he
right.
does.
If it's going to run, Andy's going to make it run. That's
Oh,
right.
absolutely.
No grandchildren.
No grandchildren.
Neither is married.
No.
Neither boy is
Neither
married.
neither married.
Neither boy is married. Okay. Now I'll go back to you. I want to make sure we get those children in there because that's crucial. We have to get those people in there. Going back to you, you have several pages of things there. How about tapping in on some of those? We have just a few minutes left. Tapping in on some of the things that you wrote down there.
Oh, well, I went to Hamel College briefly when I got out of high school, and I thought I wanted to be an accountant, and lo and behold, I got a job at Junior Achievement in Barberton, and decided, no, I didn't want to be an accountant. I'd rather earn money now, and which is what I did. I worked for Junior Achievement for a couple years, and then I started to work with my dad at Carburetor Ignition in '65. He needed help, and so I came and started working part-time with him. While the kids were still little, I didn't want to work full-time, and then I stayed with, of course, C&I, Carburetor Ignition and C&I until '93 when I sold the business. And then I thought I was going to retire, but about 6 months of that, and I says, I don't want to do that anymore. So I worked with some real estate. I was in real estate for a while, and helped organize a company called All Wound Up.
Okay, this is what I wanted to hear you talk about.
Oh, okay. And
what's All Wound Up about?
All Wound Up was a toy store, and they had all wind-up toys. And they were seasonal.
Where was it?
Well, this particular store was in Elyria. I would drive to Elyria every day, and I wasn't familiar with the Elyria area at all, so I had to I had to get help in there. I had to hire people, and it's difficult when you're not familiar with an area, but we did it, and we got this store all set up. And I didn't work there very long, mainly because the drive was horrendous. I had long hours. I had to be there at 7 in the morning and work till 11 at night. And
that's a long day.
It's a long day and a long drive. Yeah, and it just and plus the fact, can you imagine having thousands of toys walking around like this all the time? It was so noisy. And I used to wear this apron around me, and I had to keep batteries in it because you had to keep putting batteries in these things because they'd wear down, and so forth. So that was a challenge, but that was, and then I worked for a payroll company, and I really enjoyed that, delivering payroll. And I delivered all through Ashland, Worcester, and
actual money, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I really enjoyed that.
You're lucky you're alive.
I know, but I like working, and I finally ended my career, because I am now retired, working for a parts store in Boardman. And I worked there for a couple years until, a couple years ago. And
you probably are the one woman in Wadsworth who knows more about auto parts than any other person. I suspect that if someone were to come up to ask you for a PCV valve, you'd know exactly what it is.
Exactly.
You know exactly what it is.
I do.
And the technology in automobiles now has become so profuse that it's almost impossible to keep up with it. But if you were still in it, I'm positive that you would be the one person who would know.
Well, now you know why we changed the name from Carburetor Ignition to C&I. because there are no more carburetors.
that's right, that's right.
You know. And plus the fact I really got tired of people would write me a check and they'd say, now how do you spell carburetor?
That's right.
And I really got tired of telling people how to spell carburetor.
Well, the joke was around town that when Dan worked there, that Dan was the I. It was Clyde and I.
Oh, okay.
So, now, tell us about Catherine. Unfortunately, she passed away, and she married a Scalisi from Erie, Pennsylvania.
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Right. But tell us about her and her family. Wish we could have had her on too as well,
Oh,
because
yeah.
She would have a tremendous amount to tell us about, because she was extremely successful in building the
Hands.
What is it?
It was called Hands.
Hands, but what's the
It was a housing,
housing
a
development?
public housing.
Public housing, that's what I was thinking of. Tell us about
Well, her and her husband got involved in the public housing with the state of Pennsylvania to provide housing for low-income people. And my sister was very good at figures and very, very effective. And she would not only go out and do the public speaking, but she kept the books and so forth. But she loved working. I think that was instilled to us by my dad. We've all been workers, and she.
Hard workers, that's true.
She really.
She also was very musical.
Very musical. She was a better pianist than I was. I may have taken 12 years of lessons, but she definitely was far better than I.
Well, she was a church organist for a while.
She was the church organist at the big cathedral in Erie, and loved playing the organ, the big organ there, and everything. And yeah, I was more the vocal. I like singing, you know.
Now, your mother was musical too.
Yes, she was.
Played piano.
Yes, she did.
And as a matter, tell us about quickly. Tell us the story about your mother with the Barberton All Girls Band.
Oh, yeah. My mother belonged. She played the soprano sax, and my mom was a very short lady, and so we always laughed when we saw pictures of her with this saxophone hanging around her neck, because they hung down to her knees. Of course, she was only 4'10" or something, you know.
And she was in the band with another Wadsworth woman too. Wasn't she?
Hattie Hartzell.
Hattie Hartzell. Highland Avenue.
Right.
Beatrice was her only daughter. Is that correct? And father's name just
Leslie.
Leslie Howard. Yes.
Yeah.
Hartzell. And Hattie played what, trumpet?
I don't remember.
I'm not positive either.
But Hattie was a very tall woman,
Oh,
so
yes.
if she stood next to Mom looked even shorter.
They look a little on the short side. We have only a minute left. Tell us anything else you want to tell us, Norabelle.
Well, I'm just glad I was able to come on and share what knowledge I do have, and I appreciate you asking me. And
Well, the fact is that we have, and this is very sad, when you and Dan are gone, that ends the well scenes.
that's correct.
That ends the well scenes, and we need to have that because it was an extremely valuable part of our heritage here in Wadsworth. The reputation your father had was extraordinary in terms of car repair. My brother, as I say, elected to join your father as a young boy. He was still in high school because he wanted to learn from the master, and he did. And then Hank, we called him Hank, but Henry, then continued to do that all the rest of his life, and he taught for many, many years carburation, which of course no longer is existing, and he did so many other things which were so much a reflection of what he learned with carburetor ignition.
Well, and we
many years
appreciated
ago.
Hank, and I must say, as a child, I really enjoyed talking to Hank.
We are so grateful to have had this kind of a relationship. We are now at the end of our hour. Thank you, Norabelle, for sharing with us as we bring out the well-seen part of Wadsworth heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.